In this episode, we focus on a skill that turns security knowledge into decisions people will actually fund and adopt, recommending prioritized improvements with crisp rationale and clear business value. Many beginners can list security best practices, but listing is not the same as recommending, and recommending is not the same as getting real change. A recommendation is a decision proposal, meaning you are saying not only what should be improved, but why it matters now, why it matters more than other options, and what value the organization will get in return. Prioritization is the discipline of choosing what to do first, second, and later, based on mission impact and risk, not based on personal preference or the loudest voice in the room. Crisp rationale means the logic is easy to follow, grounded in evidence, and free of unnecessary complexity. Business value means you connect the security improvement to outcomes the organization cares about, such as reduced downtime, reduced likelihood of costly incidents, improved customer trust, smoother audits, or faster, safer delivery of services. When you can do this well, security stops sounding like fear and starts sounding like responsible management. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good recommendation starts with a clear statement of the problem you are trying to solve, because without a clear problem, the improvement will feel optional. The problem should be described in concrete terms, like inconsistent access reviews for privileged accounts, incomplete logging on critical systems, slow incident escalation, or untested recovery procedures. It should also include the consequence, meaning what can happen if the problem remains, such as increased chance of unauthorized access, delayed detection, extended downtime, or regulatory exposure. Beginners sometimes skip the consequence because it feels negative, but consequence is the reason action is justified. The key is to describe consequence calmly and realistically, without exaggeration. You are not trying to scare people, you are trying to show the cost of inaction in terms leadership can understand. When the problem and consequence are clear, the improvement becomes an obvious step toward lowering risk and supporting mission reliability. Once the problem is defined, you need to explain why your proposed improvement is the right response. This is where crisp rationale matters, because people must trust that the recommendation is not just a trend or a personal opinion. Rationale can include evidence such as incident patterns, audit findings, recurring exceptions, or gaps identified in capability assessments. It can also include common failure modes in similar environments, as long as you tie it back to your organization's reality. A crisp rationale avoids long technical detours and instead focuses on cause and effect. For example, if detection is slow because critical systems do not generate usable logs, the rationale for improving logging is direct. Better visibility enables faster identification of suspicious behavior and reduces time attackers can operate unnoticed. If recovery is unreliable because restores are not tested, the rationale for regular restore testing is direct. You cannot assume backup success until you prove you can restore. Crisp rationale is essentially the shortest accurate explanation that connects the gap to the improvement and the improvement to the outcome. Business value is often misunderstood as only financial value, but in practice it includes any outcome the organization prioritizes. Financial value can be direct, like avoiding incident response costs, reducing downtime, and preventing fraud losses, but it can also be indirect, like protecting revenue by maintaining service availability. Business value can also be operational, like reducing support tickets caused by confusion, improving onboarding and offboarding efficiency, or reducing rework caused by late security interventions. Business value can be reputational, like preserving customer trust and brand credibility. It can be compliance-related, like passing audits with fewer findings and less scramble. It can be safety-related in environments where system reliability affects physical outcomes. A strong security recommendation chooses one or two value themes that match the organization's mission and current leadership concerns, and then explains value in plain language. Beginners should remember that business value is not a trick to disguise security. It is the real reason the organization invests in controls. If a control does not deliver value, it will not survive over time. Prioritization requires a method, even if it is simple, because method protects you from bias and helps you explain decisions. A common approach is to weigh impact, likelihood, and effort, while also considering dependencies and timing. Impact is how much harm could be prevented or reduced if the improvement succeeds. Likelihood is how plausible the risk is in your environment, based on evidence and context. Effort includes cost, time, complexity, and change burden on teams. Dependencies are the foundational elements that must exist first, such as asset visibility before broad monitoring or identity hygiene before access review improvements. Timing includes whether the organization is in the middle of major changes that affect adoption. You do not need complicated math to use this approach, but you do need consistency. If two improvements both reduce risk, you prioritize the one with higher impact and likelihood and lower effort, unless dependencies require a different order. This is how you move from a long wish list to a credible plan. A crisp recommendation list also benefits from distinguishing quick wins from foundational investments and longer-term enhancements. Quick wins are improvements that reduce risk quickly with relatively low change burden, such as clarifying ownership, tightening a simple process, or improving communication and training around a known confusion point. Foundational investments are improvements that may take longer but enable many other controls, like establishing reliable asset inventory, standardizing identity processes, or building consistent logging pipelines for critical systems. Longer-term enhancements are improvements that refine and optimize, like advanced analytics or program automation that builds on stable foundations. Beginners sometimes assume the most advanced control should be first, but advanced controls often fail when foundations are weak. By separating improvements into these categories mentally, you can prioritize in a way that builds momentum without skipping essentials. You also make it easier to explain to leadership why you are not immediately pursuing every exciting idea. The plan becomes coherent. Early wins build trust and capacity, foundations build leverage, and enhancements build maturity. When you present recommendations, clarity is improved if each recommendation has a consistent structure in your own thinking, even though you are not presenting it as a formal template. Each recommendation should answer what you will change, why it matters, what outcome it improves, and what it will cost in terms of effort and attention. It should also highlight the risk of not doing it and any key dependencies. For example, recommending stronger access governance might include clarifying who approves privileged access, ensuring reviews occur on a predictable cadence, and improving visibility into accounts. The rationale could reference recurring access issues or audit findings, and the business value could include reduced chance of unauthorized changes and improved accountability. The effort could be moderate, and dependencies might include having accurate account inventories. The recommendation becomes easy to evaluate because it is specific. Beginners should note that specificity is not the same as technical detail. You can be specific about outcomes and responsibilities without describing configuration steps. Crisp rationale also means acknowledging trade-offs openly, because stakeholders know that changes have costs, and pretending otherwise reduces trust. A recommendation might increase friction for certain actions, require training time, or temporarily slow a process while people learn it. The key is to show that the trade-off is worth it because it reduces higher costs, like downtime, incidents, or chaotic emergency work. You can also reduce fear by describing how the improvement will be introduced in stages, such as piloting with a critical team, gathering feedback, and then expanding. This shows that security is thoughtful about operational impact. Beginners sometimes think they must present security improvements as purely beneficial, but mature leaders prefer honesty because it helps them plan. When you acknowledge trade-offs, you can also propose ways to minimize them, like simplifying approvals or providing clearer guidance. This makes the recommendation feel like a partnership rather than a demand. Another important aspect is aligning recommendations to stakeholders who can champion them. An improvement that touches identity might need support from teams responsible for user accounts and onboarding. An improvement that touches recovery might need support from infrastructure teams and business owners who define recovery priorities. An improvement that touches data handling might need support from legal, compliance, and business units that manage sensitive information. When you tie recommendations to the stakeholders who will execute and benefit, you increase the chance of adoption. You also show respect for ownership, which strengthens governance. For beginners, it is useful to remember that the best recommendation is not the one you personally like most, but the one the organization can actually execute with committed owners. A recommendation with no clear owner is not a recommendation, it is a wish. Identifying ownership is part of crisp rationale because it shows the path from decision to execution. Metrics should also be linked to prioritized improvements, because metrics turn recommendations into measurable progress rather than vague promises. If you recommend improving detection coverage, you should be able to measure how many critical systems have usable logs and whether time to detect improves. If you recommend improving recovery readiness, you should measure restore success rates and time to restore for critical services. If you recommend improving access governance, you should measure review completion quality, time to remove access, and reduction in exceptions. Metrics make it easier to show business value because you can point to changes over time. They also protect against the common failure mode of doing activity that feels productive but does not move risk. Beginners should see metrics as the language of accountability, not as paperwork. When leaders can see progress, they are more willing to fund the next phase. When teams can see progress, they feel their effort is meaningful. It is also useful to avoid the trap of over-prioritizing what is easiest to talk about rather than what matters most. Some improvements are easy to describe, like launching awareness messages, while other improvements are harder, like cleaning up identity data or reducing technical debt. Crisp rationale helps you defend harder improvements when they deliver higher risk reduction. At the same time, you do not want to prioritize only large, difficult projects, because that can delay visible progress. The best prioritized plan usually includes a mix, 1 or 2 foundational efforts, a set of quick wins that remove pain, and a small number of targeted high-impact improvements that address urgent risk. This balanced approach respects both risk and morale. Beginners should remember that morale is not separate from security. A burned-out organization makes more mistakes and takes more shortcuts. A plan that mixes visible wins with meaningful foundations tends to build durable support. Communication style matters when recommending improvements because your tone can either build confidence or trigger resistance. A calm, precise tone that uses evidence and respects constraints is more persuasive than a dramatic tone that assumes the worst. When you describe risk, you focus on plausible scenarios and likely impacts rather than sensational stories. When you describe improvements, you focus on outcomes and operational fit rather than technology hype. You also avoid implying that teams are careless, because most security gaps come from complexity, unclear processes, and competing priorities, not from bad intent. This respectful tone is part of business value because it reduces conflict and makes collaboration easier. Beginners sometimes think the goal is to win an argument, but the goal is to enable adoption. The best recommendation is one that the organization feels capable of executing and proud of achieving. Recommending prioritized improvements with crisp rationale and business value is how a security program earns momentum, because it turns assessment into action and action into visible results. It requires you to choose, to explain, and to measure, all while respecting culture and constraints. When done well, it gives leadership a clear path to reduce risk without guessing, and it gives teams a clear reason to change behavior. The main takeaway for beginners is that prioritization is not a lack of ambition. It is disciplined ambition, and disciplined ambition is what makes progress real. When you connect improvements to mission outcomes and provide clear rationale grounded in evidence, you make security decisions easier for everyone involved. Over time, those decisions build capabilities that compound, because each improvement strengthens the organization's ability to execute the next one. That is the quiet power of good governance. It turns security from a series of emergencies into a steady program of risk reduction that the business can understand, support, and sustain.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.